Hi guys, it's always been the belief of Remainers and to a certain extent some politicians in Europe that Boris Johnson and David Frost were negotiating in bad faith when it came to the Withdrawal Agreement. Well, Frost himself removed any doubt when he appeared in the House of Lords on Monday to say that he and his former boss had never meant for the oven-ready deal to be long-term. The guy who negotiated the agreement with the EU, who presented it as a massive win for Britain and a good deal for Europe, says that it was crap and that the Windsor Framework, which is built upon it, is protecting Northern Ireland from the worst of Brexit. Something he seems to want to inflict on that part of the United Kingdom. Have a listen to this tripe.
The Johnson government, of which I was part, always took the view, indeed many criticised us for taking it, that the protocol was unsatisfactory and temporary. We always hoped that ultimately divergence by GB will produce the collapse of the protocol arrangements, whether consensually through a vote, through a further negotiation or otherwise. We always wanted something better.
So it was designed to fail. So you wanted it to fail. You wanted GB to diverge on EU standards, and this would collapse the protocol, or collapse the withdrawal agreement. The protocol, of course, is part of the withdrawal agreement. You negotiated it, but you never said this at the time, either because you didn't understand it, or you were lying. Which is it? There are only two possibilities here. You agreed to something that you didn't understand, or you lied about what you agreed to. And then this begs the question, why was the EU unwilling to allow Britain to be part of the Horizon programme? Because you had people lying to the EU, saying, or either not understanding the withdrawal agreement. Which is it, Lord Frost? Either you didn't understand or you were lying. We were expecting this thing to collapse. It was never meant to be permanent. Why didn't you say that to the British people? When Boris Johnson was winning an 80-seat majority, Boris Johnson at no stage, or Lord Frost at no stage, said, this oven-ready deal is just a temporary thing. It's not actually designed to last the long term. It's just to get us over a hump in the road. It's designed to collapse at some stage very soon when we start diverging. You never said that, so you were being dishonest with the British people, or you were being incompetent, ignorant of what you actually signed up to. Which is it?
Now, though, the government's committed to the view that the Windsor Framework is better and should be defended. But the consequence is that as problems emerge, as they will, the government must ally itself with the EU and defend these new arrangements, indeed impose them on a deeply divided Northern Ireland.
Why did you never say any of this at the time either? Why did you not say this is going to create problems? This is going to have a number of issues. No, it was perfect. It was designed. It was presented as a perfect solution. At no stage did Johnson or Frost say, we have this oven-ready deal, but there are a number of problems with it.
It must actively support rules that destroy long-standing trade arrangements within this country and impose laws without consent in Northern Ireland.
Once again, something you signed up to. You never said at any stage, look, Northern Ireland, you're just going to have to take this. We're going to negotiate on your behalf. We're going to take decisions on your behalf. This is the consequence of Northern Ireland being part of the United Kingdom, which Brexiteers in Northern Ireland seem to keep saying isn't the case. Northern Ireland is part of the EU. But then if Northern Ireland is part of the EU, why doesn't Northern Ireland have a commissioner? Why isn't it sending members of Parliament, members to the European Parliament? Obviously, it's not part of the EU, it's part of the United Kingdom. And the people negotiating on behalf of Northern Ireland is the UK government.
And when problems emerge, as they do, for example, over horticultural trade with Northern Ireland, it denies that they exist. I don't think the government's...
It denies that it exists. Who's denying reality here? Who's denying that they told the British people that they had an oven-ready deal, that it was a solution, it was a panacea to all problems?
I don't find that comfortable, I'm afraid, and I fear the long-term consequences. Final point, fourth one, which is the final difficulty, is that the government's commitment to the framework is going to shape its broader policy. That's why I can't entirely share the view of those on my side of the argument who say, yes, it's imperfect, but time to move on. The framework creates a huge incentive to avoid diverging from the EU in relevant areas, because doing so will make its arrangements less and less workable, more vulnerable to EU interdiction, harder and harder to defend as a success.
It's not a success. Look, what's interesting here as well is look at who's surrounding David Frost. You have Kate Hoey on one side, absolute headbanger, and you have Daniel Hannan on the other. Daniel, who said back in 2015, nobody's talking about leaving the single market. Like, you have Lord Frost there standing up talking about how the Windsor Framework is a disaster. It needs to be thrown in the bin. And you have Daniel Hannan there sitting, like, why the hell is he in the House of Lords? But he's sitting there, the guy who said, don't worry, nobody's talking about leaving the single market. If the UK had not left the single market, there would be no Northern Ireland Protocol. There would be no issue about trade moving from GB to Northern Ireland or Northern Ireland to GB. How can Daniel Hannan show his face in public? How can he sit in the House of Lords? Maybe it's because he's getting £300 a day or whatever it is.
And perhaps we've already seen the first consequences in the watered-down Retained EU Law Act. My Lords, the Windsor Framework exists. We're going to have to live with it, it seems, for some years yet. But it is a sticking plaster, and it isn't a real solution to the underlying problems.
But you don't actually have any solutions. You don't have anything. Of course, the ironic thing is he's the one who created this. He's the architect. He's the architect who designed the building and is now complaining that there aren't enough fire escapes. You know, he's not some backbench MP who didn't read the deal and didn't understand it and is now complaining about it. He's the guy who negotiated it. He's the one who signed his name. And he's complaining that Northern Ireland will not be impacted in the same way as the rest of the United Kingdom. But what does he and others want? They want a hard border, it seems, on the island of Ireland. And how is that going to fix the problem? But that's what the DUP want. And he seems to be dancing to the DUP's tune. Like, I've always said, when it came to Brexit, when it came to the Union, Brexiteers would always choose Brexit. But Brexiteers in Northern Ireland, Brexiteers in England, of course, would choose Brexit over the Union. But Brexiteers in Northern Ireland were in a bit of a difficult spot because their hatred of the EU and Ireland resulted in them voting for something that undermines the Union. Now, either they didn't understand that at the time or they didn't care. Now, they can't say that they didn't understand it because people were telling them. The Irish government was telling them. Remainers in Britain were telling them. The European Union officials, well, not officials, but diplomats and politicians in Europe were saying this. It's going to undermine the Union. Why are you voting for this? It would be a disaster. And they said, we don't care. We'll go ahead with it anyway. We're putting our trust, in a sense, in people like Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson wouldn't lie to us.
If the government had said something like, this deal softens the protocol, but it doesn't remove it, it's the best we could get for now, because we didn't want to use the NI protocol bill, and the EU knew it, but it can't be the end of the story. I think that would have been a fairer statement of the position and much easier for people on my side of the argument to get.
He wanted the British government to be honest. Just let that marinade in your mind for a moment. Lord Frost is complaining that Rishi Sunak's government, when they signed the Windsor Framework, were not being honest enough. Just think about that. Lord Frost standing up in the House of Lords, complaining about an agreement that he signed, he negotiated, is complaining that Rishi Sunak's government should have been a bit more honest with the public. I'll leave it at that. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.